In the heart of Mexico City, where opulent mansions cast long shadows over humble dwellings, lived Esperanza Mendoza, a talented seamstress with dreams as vibrant as the fabric she stitched. At 25, her nimble fingers could weave magic into any garment, but her circumstances kept her trapped in a world far removed from the glittering high society she secretly yearned to join. Esperanza's tiny apartment, perched precariously on the edge of the fashionable Polanco district, was a testament to her determination. Scraps of luxurious silks and satins adorned every surface, remnants of the exquisite gowns she created for the city's elite. Yet, for all her skill, Esperanza remained invisible to her wealthy clients, nothing more than a pair of hands that brought their fashion fantasies to life. On a sweltering summer morning, as the city stirred to life, Esperanza received a call that would change her life forever. The voice on the other end belonged to Dona Victoria Alvarez, the most influential socialite in Mexico City. "I need a gown for the governor's ball," Dona Victoria's imperious voice crackled through the phone. "It must be spectacular. You come highly recommended, though I can't imagine why. Be at my mansion in an hour." Esperanza's heart raced. This was her chance, the opportunity she had been waiting for all her life. With trembling hands, she gathered her best sketches and a suitcase of fabric samples. As she stepped out into the bustling street, a sense of destiny propelled her forward. The Alvarez mansion loomed before her, a palatial structure that seemed to touch the sky. Esperanza's worn shoes scuffed against the immaculate marble as a disdainful maid led her to the grand salon. There, surrounded by an entourage of equally haughty women, sat Dona Victoria, resplendent in her designer outfit and dripping with jewels. "So, this is the miraculous seamstress," Dona Victoria's lips curled into a smirk. "Let's see if you're worth your salt, girl." For the next hour, Esperanza poured her heart and soul into her presentation. Her sketches were works of art, her fabric choices impeccable. Yet, with each passing minute, the smirks and whispers of the high society ladies grew more pronounced. "Darling," Dona Victoria finally interrupted, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "do you really think you can create something worthy of me? Look at you, in your shabby dress and scuffed shoes. How could you possibly understand true elegance?" The other women tittered, their laughter cutting through Esperanza like shards of glass. She felt her dreams crumbling around her, the weight of their disdain crushing her spirit. "I may not have your wealth, Dona Victoria," Esperanza found herself saying, her voice surprisingly steady, "but I have something far more valuable, talent and passion. Give me a chance, and I'll create a gown that will make you the envy of every woman at the ball." For a moment, silence reigned. Then, unexpectedly, a voice spoke up from the back of the room. "Let her try, Victoria. What do you have to lose?" The speaker was Sofia Herrera, Dona Victoria's daughter-in-law. Unlike the others, her eyes held a glimmer of kindness. Dona Victoria considered for a moment, then nodded curtly. "Very well. You have 2 weeks. If you fail, you'll never work in the city again. And don't even think about asking for payment up front. Seamstresses like you should be grateful for the opportunity." As Esperanza left the mansion, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Humiliation warred with determination, fear with hope. Little did she know that this moment would be the catalyst for a series of events that would shake the very foundations of Mexico City's high society. Over the next 2 weeks, Esperanza poured every ounce of her skill and creativity into Dona Victoria's gown. She worked day and night, her fingers bleeding from countless needle pricks, her eyes straining in the dim light of her tiny apartment. The gown began to take shape, a masterpiece of midnight blue silk and silver embroidery, with a neckline that would showcase Dona Victoria's famous diamond necklace. On the night before the ball, Esperanza made her way back to the Alvarez mansion, the precious gown carefully wrapped. Her heart pounded as she was once again led to the grand salon. This time, however, she held her head high. She knew what she had created was beyond compare. Dona Victoria's reaction was not what Esperanza expected. The socialite's eyes widened as the gown was revealed, a flicker of admiration quickly masked by a haughty sniff. "It will do, I suppose," she said dismissively. "Leave it here. You may go." Esperanza's protest died on her lips as Dona Victoria turned away, already discussing jewelry options with her friends. With a heavy heart, Esperanza left the mansion, her dreams of recognition once again crushed. The next evening, as the city's elite gathered for the governor's ball, Esperanza sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by scraps of fabric and broken dreams. She couldn't bear to watch the television coverage, knowing that her creation would be there, admired by all, while she remained in obscurity. A frantic knocking at her door startled her from her melancholy. She opened it to find Sofia Herrera, Dona Victoria's daughter-in-law, her face flushed with excitement. "Esperanza! You must come with me now. There's something you need to see." Before Esperanza could protest, Sofia had grabbed her hand and was pulling her towards a waiting limousine. As they sped through the city streets, Sofia explained breathlessly. "Your gown, it's the talk of the ball. Everyone is asking about the designer. But Victoria, she's taking credit for it. She's telling everyone she designed it herself." Esperanza felt as if she had been plunged into icy water. Her creation, her masterpiece, stolen by the very woman who had humiliated her. But why had Sofia come to tell her this? As they arrived at the glittering venue of the governor's ball, Esperanza's confusion only grew. Sofia led her through a side entrance, navigating the crowded halls with determination. "There's something you need to know," Sofia whispered as they approached the main ballroom. "Something that will change everything." Just then, they heard Dona Victoria's voice, loud and clear above the murmur of the crowd. "Of course I designed it myself. Do you think I would trust something this important to a mere seamstress?" Sofia's grip on Esperanza's arm tightened. "It's time," she said, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of anticipation and something else. Was it fear? "It's time for the truth to come out." As they stepped into the ballroom, the glittering crowd parted, and Esperanza found herself face to face with Dona Victoria. The older woman's face paled, her champagne glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the marble floor. In that moment, as the shocked gasps of the elite filled the air, Esperanza knew that her life was about to change forever. The truth that Sofia spoke of hung in the air, a secret poised to shatter the carefully constructed world of lies and pretense that surrounded her. Little did Esperanza know that this was just the beginning. The events set in motion that night would unravel a web of deceit, expose long-buried secrets, and test the limits of love, loyalty, and redemption. For in the glittering world of Mexico City's high society, nothing was ever as it seemed, and the greatest triumphs often came from the most unexpected places. As the crowd's whispers grew louder and Dona Victoria's face contorted with a mixture of rage and fear, Esperanza stood tall, her heart pounding but her resolve unshakable. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it head-on. For the first time in her life, she felt the stirrings of true power, not the power that came from wealth or social status, but the power of truth and talent that no one could deny. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of Mexico City's elite and change Esperanza's life forever. But as she locked eyes with Dona Victoria across the glittering ballroom, Esperanza knew one thing for certain: her days of being invisible were over. The true story of the seamstress was about to be told, and nothing would ever be the same again. The tension in the ballroom was palpable as Esperanza and Dona Victoria faced each other, the shattered champagne glass at their feet a fitting metaphor for the fragile facade of high society that was about to crack. "What is the meaning of this?" Dona Victoria hissed, her eyes darting between Esperanza and Sofia. "How dare you crash this event, you insolent girl?" Esperanza opened her mouth to speak, but Sofia stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "It's time for the truth, Victoria. Time for everyone to know who really designed that magnificent gown you're wearing. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The governor himself, a distinguished man with salt and pepper hair, moved closer, his interest piqued. "What truth?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as he looked between the three women. Sophia took a deep breath. "The truth, Your Excellency, is that this talented young woman, Esperanza Mendoza, is the true designer of the gown that has captivated everyone tonight. Dona Victoria has stolen the credit for herself." The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers and exclamations. Dona Victoria's face turned an alarming shade of purple as she spluttered in indignation. "Lies! All lies!" she shrieked. "This girl is nothing but a simple seamstress. She could never create something of this caliber. Sophia, how dare you spread such malicious rumors?" But Sophia wasn't finished. With a trembling hand, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I have proof," she announced, her voice wavering slightly. "This is a copy of the original sketch for the gown, signed and dated by Esperanza Mendoza 2 weeks ago." As Sophia unfolded the paper, revealing Esperanza's exquisite design, the young seamstress felt a surge of pride and gratitude. But she also couldn't help wondering, why was Sophia doing this for her? The governor took the sketch, examining it closely. His eyebrows rose in appreciation. "This is remarkable work," he murmured. He turned to Esperanza. "Young lady, is this truly your creation?" Esperanza straightened her shoulders, meeting the governor's gaze steadily. "Yes, Your Excellency. I designed and created this gown for Dona Victoria. I put my heart and soul into every stitch, hoping it would be my chance to prove myself." The governor nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Dona Victoria. "And you, Senora? What do you have to say about this?" Dona Victoria's composure crumbled. In a fit of rage, she reached up and tore at the gown, ripping the delicate fabric. "I will not stand here and be accused by a nobody," she screeched. "This party is over." As she stormed out of the ballroom, leaving a wake of shocked guests, Esperanza felt a mix of emotions: vindication, sadness at seeing her creation destroyed, and a growing curiosity about Sophia's role in all this. The governor cleared his throat, addressing the stunned crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have witnessed quite a drama tonight. But let us not forget the true star of the evening, this talented young designer, Esperanza Mendoza. I believe we'll be seeing great things from her in the future." As the crowd began to buzz with excitement, many guests approaching Esperanza to congratulate her and inquire about commissions, Sophia gently took her arm. "We should talk," she whispered. "There's more you need to know." Sophia led Esperanza to a quiet corner of the garden, the sounds of the ball fading behind them. In the soft glow of the garden lights, Sophia's face looked drawn and tired. "Why did you help me?" Esperanza asked, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "You barely know me." Sophia sighed, sinking onto a stone bench. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible, to have your talents ignored and your dreams crushed by the Alvarez family." Esperanza sat beside her, sensing there was much more to this story. "What do you mean?" "I was once like you," Sophia began, her voice barely above a whisper. "A talented designer with dreams of making it big in the fashion world. But then I met Ricardo Alvarez, Victoria's son. I fell in love, and I thought he loved me too. We got married, and I thought my dreams were about to come true." Sophia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But it was all a lie. Victoria never accepted me. She saw me as a threat to her social standing. She stole my designs, just like she tried to steal yours. She used her influence to blacklist me in the fashion industry. And Ricardo, he stood by and let it happen. Esperanza felt a surge of empathy for the older woman. That's terrible, Sophia. But why stay with them? Why not leave? Sophia laughed bitterly. It's not that simple. The Alvarez family has secrets, dark, dangerous secrets. Once you're in, it's almost impossible to get out. She turned to Esperanza, her eyes intense. But you, Esperanza, you have a chance. Your talent is undeniable. Don't let them crush you like they crushed me. As Esperanza tried to process this information, a commotion from the ballroom caught their attention. They hurried back inside to find the party in chaos. In the center of the room stood Donna Victoria, her face ashen, clutching a phone to her ear. "What do you mean, he's gone?" she was saying, her voice shrill with panic. "Find him. I don't care what it takes." Sophia gasped. "Ricardo," she whispered. Something's happened to Ricardo. Over the next few days, Mexico City was abuzz with gossip. The mysterious disappearance of Ricardo Alvarez, heir to the Alvarez fortune, overshadowed even the scandal of Donna Victoria's deception at the governor's ball. For Esperanza, it was a whirlwind of activity. Her phone rang constantly with commission requests from the city's elite, all eager to have a gown designed by the seamstress who had humbled the great Donna Victoria. But even as she reveled in her newfound success, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled into something much bigger and potentially dangerous. Sophia's words about the Alvarez family's dark secrets haunted her. What could be so terrible that it would keep Sophia trapped in a loveless marriage? And what did Ricardo's disappearance have to do with it all? A week after the ball, Esperanza received an unexpected visitor at her tiny apartment. Mateo Fuentes, a ruggedly handsome investigative journalist, stood at her door, his dark eyes intense as he introduced himself. "Señorita Mendoza," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need your help. I'm investigating the Alvarez family, and I believe you may have information that could be crucial to uncovering the truth." Esperanza hesitated, torn between her desire to help and her fear of getting involved in something dangerous. "What kind of information?" she asked cautiously. Mateo glanced around the hallway before leaning in closer. "I have reason to believe that Ricardo Alvarez's disappearance is connected to a much larger conspiracy involving the Alvarez family's business dealings. Your interaction with Donna Victoria and your connection to Sofia Herrera could be the key to unraveling it all." As Esperanza listened to Mateo outline his suspicions, money laundering, political corruption, even hints of involvement with drug cartels, she felt a chill run down her spine. Had her simple dream of becoming a respected designer inadvertently drawn her into a web of crime and deceit? But even as fear threatened to overwhelm her, Esperanza felt a spark of determination ignite within her. If there was a chance that she could help bring the truth to light and possibly help Sofia escape the clutches of the Alvarez family, didn't she have a responsibility to try? "All right," she said finally, meeting Mateo's gaze. "I'll help you. But I need to know everything you know. No secrets, no half-truths. If I'm risking my life for this, I want to be fully informed." Mateo nodded, a look of relief and admiration crossing his face. "Thank you, Esperanza. I promise, I'll tell you everything. But not here, it's not safe. Meet me tomorrow at the Café del Angel at 3 p.m. Come alone, and make sure you're not followed." As Mateo left, Esperanza leaned against the closed door, her heart pounding. In just a few short weeks, her life had transformed from that of a simple seamstress to a key player in what seemed to be a dangerous game of secrets and lies. Little did she know that her decision to help Mateo would set in motion a chain of events that would not only expose the dark underbelly of Mexico City's elite but also lead her to uncover shocking truths about her own past, truths that would change her life forever. The next day, as Esperanza made her way to the Café del Angel, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The bustling streets of Mexico City, once so familiar and comforting, now seemed full of potential threats. Every passing car, every stranger's glance, set her nerves on edge. She arrived at the cafe early, choosing a table with a clear view of both the entrance and the street outside. As she waited, sipping a cup of strong coffee, her mind raced with questions. What had she gotten herself into? Was she putting herself in danger? And most pressingly, what secrets could be so terrible that they would drive Ricardo Alvarez into hiding and keep Sofia trapped in a gilded cage? At precisely 3 p.m., Mateo walked in, his eyes scanning the cafe before settling on Esperanza. He sat down across from her, placing a thick manila envelope on the table between them. Before we begin, he said in a low voice, I need to know if you're absolutely sure about this, Esperanza. Once I show you what's in this envelope, there's no going back. Your life will never be the same. Esperanza took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the envelope. This was her last chance to walk away, to return to her life of anonymity and safety. But as she looked into Mateo's eyes, seeing the determination and hint of desperation there, she knew she couldn't turn back now. I'm sure, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Show me. Mateo nodded, opening the envelope and spreading out a series of documents and photographs. The Alvarez family's wealth, he began, isn't just from their legitimate businesses. They're deeply involved in a complex money laundering operation, funneling funds for some of the most dangerous drug cartels in Mexico. Esperanza gasped as she looked at the financial records and surveillance photos. There was Dona Victoria, shaking hands with a man Mateo identified as a notorious cartel leader. Another photo showed Ricardo leaving a warehouse known to be a front for drug operations. But that's not all, Mateo continued, his voice grim. The roots of this conspiracy go back decades. And Esperanza, it involves your family too. Esperanza felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her. My family? What are you talking about? My parents were simple people, my father was a carpenter, my mother a housekeeper. Mateo pushed a faded photograph across the table. Esperanza's hand trembled as she picked it up. The woman in the photo was undoubtedly her mother, much younger than Esperanza had ever known her. But it was the man standing beside her mother that made Esperanza's blood run cold. That's impossible, she whispered. Your mother, Mateo said gently, worked for the Alvarez family before you were born. And the man in that photo? That's Eduardo Alvarez, Victoria's late husband, and Ricardo's father. The implications hit Esperanza like a physical blow. Could it be possible? Was she somehow related to the very family that had caused her so much pain and humiliation? As if reading her thoughts, Mateo leaned forward. Esperanza, I believe this is why Sofia helped you. I think she knows about your connection to the family. And I think it's why Ricardo disappeared. He must have discovered the truth and is either running from it, or was silenced because of it. Esperanza's mind reeled with the implications. Her entire life, her identity, everything she thought she knew about herself and her family, it was all built on a foundation of lies. But as the initial shock began to fade, a new emotion took its place, determination. What do we do now? She asked, meeting Mateo's gaze with newfound resolve. A hint of a smile played at Mateo's lips. Now, we dig deeper. We find Ricardo, we uncover the full extent of the Alvarez family's crimes, and we bring them to justice. But Esperanza, it's going to be dangerous. The people we're dealing with won't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens their operation. Esperanza nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. I have an idea, she said. My designs, they've made me popular among the elite. I can use that. Get close to them, gather information. Mateo looked impressed. That could work. But you'll need to be careful. One wrong move, and... I know, Esperanza interrupted. But I have to do this. Not just for justice, but for the truth. I need to know who I really am. As they left the cafe, parting ways with plans to meet again soon, Esperanza felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. Her life as a simple seamstress was over. She was stepping into a world of danger, secrets, and lies, but also one of truth and justice. Little did she know that her journey was about to take an even more dramatic turn. For at that very moment, in a secluded villa on the outskirts of the city, Ricardo Alvarez was waking up from a drug-induced sleep, his mind foggy but filled with the determination to expose his family's crimes, and to find the half-sister he had only recently discovered he had. As night fell over Mexico City, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of power and wealth, expose long-buried secrets, and test the limits of love, loyalty, and redemption. For Esperanza, the seamstress who had dared to dream of a better life, the real challenge was just beginning. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but it was also paved with the promise of truth, and perhaps, just perhaps, a chance at the happiness and belonging she had always yearned for. The pieces were in place, the players poised for action. As Esperanza looked out over the glittering cityscape from her tiny apartment window, she felt a shiver of anticipation. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it head-on. For in the intricate tapestry of lies and deceit that surrounded her, she was determined to weave her own destiny, one stitch at a time. As the sun rose over Mexico City, bathing the sprawling metropolis in golden light, Esperanza stood before her mirror, carefully applying the finishing touches to her makeup. Today was no ordinary day, it was the day she would step into the Lion's Den, attending a charity luncheon hosted by none other than Dona Victoria herself. The invitation had arrived a week ago, a peace offering of sorts after the scandal at the governor's ball. Esperanza knew it was a trap, a carefully orchestrated attempt by Victoria to save face and possibly gather intelligence on her new rival. But it was also an opportunity, one that Esperanza and Mateo had been meticulously planning to exploit. As she slipped into a stunning emerald green dress of her own design, Esperanza couldn't help but marvel at how much her life had changed in such a short time. From a struggling seamstress to a rising star in the fashion world, and now a secret investigator delving into the dark underbelly of Mexico's elite, it was almost too much to comprehend. A soft knock at the door startled her from her reverie. She opened it to find Mateo, looking dashing in a well-tailored suit. His eyes widened appreciatively as he took in her appearance. "You look incredible," he said, a hint of awe in his voice. Esperanza felt a blush creep up her cheeks. Over the past weeks, as they had worked closely together, she had found herself increasingly drawn to the passionate journalist. But she pushed those feelings aside, there was too much at stake to be distracted by matters of the heart. "Thank you," she replied, "all business." "Is everything ready?" Mateo nodded, his expression turning serious. "The microphone is sewn into your clutch, as we discussed. Remember, we just need you to get Victoria talking about her business dealings. Any mention of Ricardo or the family's connections could be crucial." Esperanza took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. As they made their way to the Alvarez mansion, Esperanza couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into the belly of the beast. The opulent estate, once a symbol of everything she aspired to, now seemed tainted, its beauty marred by the knowledge of the corruption that lurked behind its gilded gates. Dona Victoria greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Esperanza, darling," she cooed, air-kissing both cheeks. "How wonderful of you to come. I do hope we can put that nasty business at the ball behind us." Esperanza forced a smile, playing her part to perfection. "Of course, Dona Victoria. I'm honored to be here." As she mingled with Mexico City's elite, Esperanza kept her ears open, fishing for any information that might be useful. She overheard snippets of conversation about business deals, political maneuvers, and most intriguingly, hushed whispers about Ricardo's continued absence. It wasn't until she found herself alone with Victoria in the powder room that Esperanza saw her chance. As Victoria touched up her makeup, Esperanza decided to take a risk. "Dona Victoria," she began hesitantly, "I couldn't help but overhear. Is it true that Ricardo is still missing? It must be so difficult for you." Victoria's hand stilled, her eyes meeting Esperanza's in the mirror. For a moment, a flicker of genuine emotion, fear, sadness, crossed her face before her mask of composure slipped back into place. "Ricardo is simply taking some time for himself," Victoria said smoothly. "The pressures of the family business can be overwhelming at times." Esperanza pressed gently, "The family business? I thought Ricardo was involved in fashion, like yourself." Victoria laughed, a brittle sound that set Esperanza's nerves on edge. "Oh, my dear, the Alvarez empire extends far beyond mere fashion. We have our fingers in many pies, so to speak. Import, export, real estate, some ventures that it's better not to discuss in polite company." The implications of Victoria's words sent a chill down Esperanza's spine. She was about to probe further when a commotion from the main hall caught their attention. They rushed out to find the luncheon in chaos. In the center of the room stood Sophia, her face pale but determined, clutching a stack of papers. "Enough!" Sophia cried, her voice ringing out over the startled gasps of the guests. "I can't keep silent any longer. Victoria, your crimes end today." Victoria's face contorted with rage. "How dare you?" she hissed, lunging for the papers in Sophia's hands. But Sophia was quicker. She began to read aloud, her voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. Financial records proving the Alvarez family's involvement in money laundering for the Sinaloa cartel. Dates and locations of drug shipments disguised as fashion imports. The room erupted into pandemonium. Some guests fled, while others stood frozen in shock. Victoria, her carefully cultivated image crumbling before her eyes, looked wildly around the room until her gaze locked onto Esperanza. In that moment, understanding dawned in Victoria's eyes. "You," she snarled, advancing on Esperanza. "This is your doing, isn't it? You've been working against me all along." Esperanza stood her ground, even as her heart raced. "I've done nothing but seek the truth, Dona Victoria. The truth you've tried so hard to bury." Just as Victoria reached for her, a new voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough, Mother." The crowd parted to reveal Ricardo Alvarez, looking haggard but very much alive. At his side stood Mateo, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Ricardo!" Victoria gasped. "Where have you been? What is the meaning of this?" Ricardo's face was grim as he approached. "I've been gathering evidence, Mother. Evidence of our family's crimes, crimes I can no longer be a part of. It's over." As if on cue, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Victoria's face drained of color as she realized the full extent of her downfall. In the chaos that followed, the arrival of the police, the shocked exclamations of the guests, the flash of cameras as word of the scandal spread, Esperanza found herself swept into a quiet corner by Mateo. "You did it," he said softly, his eyes shining with admiration. "You were incredible in there." Esperanza shook her head, still processing the whirlwind of events. "We did it," she corrected him. "But Mateo, there's still so much we don't know. My connection to the Alvarez family." Mateo took her hand, his touch sending a jolt through her. "We'll figure it out together," he promised. "This is just the beginning, Esperanza. The truth always finds a way to come to light. As they watched Victoria being led away in handcuffs, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, Esperanza felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also a strange sense of sadness. For all her faults, Victoria was potentially her family. The thought brought a new wave of questions and uncertainties. Ricardo approached them, his face etched with weariness and regret. "Esperanza," he said, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk. There's so much you need to know, about your mother, about our father, about your place in this family." Esperanza nodded, steeling herself for whatever revelations were to come. As she followed Ricardo to a quiet study, away from the chaos of the main hall, she caught sight of Sofia. The older woman gave her a small, sad smile, a smile that spoke volumes about shared pain and the cost of secrets. Inside the study, Ricardo poured 3 glasses of whiskey with shaking hands, offering one each to Esperanza and Mateo. He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Esperanza's with a mix of shame and resolve. "I suppose I should start at the beginning," he said. "Our father, Eduardo Alvarez, was not the man the public thought he was. Behind the facade of a successful businessman, he was a ruthless criminal, deeply involved with drug cartels and money laundering. But he had one weakness: your mother." Esperanza's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it all the more real. Ricardo continued, his voice heavy with emotion. "They met when she was working as a maid in our house. It was a whirlwind romance, kept secret from everyone, including my mother. When your mother became pregnant, our father panicked. He paid her off, set her up with a new life and a fake husband, the man you knew as your father." Tears stung Esperanza's eyes as the weight of the lies that had shaped her life crashed down upon her. "But why?" she whispered. "Why keep it a secret all these years?" Ricardo's laugh was bitter. "Power, of course. The great Eduardo Alvarez couldn't have an illegitimate child tarnishing his reputation. And later, when I discovered the truth, I was too much of a coward to come forward. I let the lies continue, let our father's criminal empire grow." He looked at Esperanza, his eyes pleading for understanding. "When I finally decided to gather evidence against the family, to try and make things right, I knew I had to find you. To tell you the truth, to give you what's rightfully yours." Esperanza's mind reeled. "What's rightfully mine?" Ricardo pulled out a folder, placing it on the desk between them. "Half of the Alvarez fortune," he said simply. "Clean money, I made sure of that. Enough for you to live any life you choose, to pursue your dreams without constraints." The room fell silent as Esperanza tried to process this bombshell. Mateo placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, grounding her. I don't know what to say," Esperanza finally managed. "This is all so much to take in." Ricardo nodded understandingly. "You don't have to decide anything now. Take time to process, to think about what you want. But know this, Esperanza, whatever you choose, you have a brother now. If you'll have me." As the gravity of the situation settled over them, a commotion from outside the study broke the tension. The door burst open to reveal Sofia, her face flushed with excitement. "You need to see this," she said breathlessly, turning on the television in the corner of the room. The screen flickered to life, showing a breaking news report. The anchor's voice filled the room. In a shocking turn of events, prominent businessman and philanthropist Alejandro Fuentes has been implicated in the Alvarez family scandal. Sources claim Fuentes was a key player in the money laundering operation. Mateo's sharp intake of breath drew Esperanza's attention. She turned to see him staring at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. "Mateo?" she asked gently. "What is it?" His voice was barely above a whisper when he replied, "Alejandro Fuentes is my father." The revelation hung in the air, adding yet another layer of complexity to the already tangled web of lies and secrets. Esperanza reached out, taking Mateo's hand in hers. In that moment, surrounded by the remnants of a crumbling empire and faced with the daunting task of rebuilding their lives from the ashes of lies, they found solace in each other's touch. As the sun began to set over Mexico City, casting long shadows across the Alvarez mansion, Esperanza realized that this was not an ending, but a beginning. A beginning fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but also filled with the promise of truth, justice, and perhaps even love. The seamstress who had once dreamed of simply being seen now stood at the center of a storm that would reshape the very fabric of Mexico's elite society. And as she looked around at the unlikely allies she had found, her newfound brother, the woman who had given her a chance, and the man who had helped her uncover the truth, Esperanza knew that whatever came next, she would face it with courage, grace, and the unshakable determination that had brought her this far. The story of the humble seamstress who brought down an empire was just beginning to unfold, and Mexico City would never be the same again. The days following the dramatic revelations at the Alvarez mansion passed in a blur for Esperanza. The media frenzy was relentless, with reporters camped outside her modest apartment, clamoring for interviews and exclusive stories. The rags-to-riches tale of the seamstress who brought down one of Mexico's most powerful families had captured the nation's imagination. But for Esperanza, the reality was far more complex than the sensationalized headlines suggested. As she sat in her living room, surrounded by stacks of legal documents and financial records, she felt overwhelmed by the weight of her newfound wealth and the responsibilities that came with it. A soft knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Mateo, his face drawn with fatigue but his eyes warm as they met hers. "How are you holding up?" he asked, stepping inside. Esperanza sighed, gesturing to the chaos around her. "Honestly? I'm not sure. It's all so much." Mateo nodded understandingly, taking a seat on the worn sofa. "I know the feeling. My father's arrest has turned my world upside down too." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Esperanza spoke. "Mateo, what do we do now? How do we move forward from this?" He reached out, taking her hand in his. The simple gesture sent a flutter through her heart. "We do what we've always done," he said softly. "We seek the truth. We use our voices to make a difference. But this time, we have resources and influence we didn't have before." Esperanza nodded slowly, an idea beginning to form in her mind. "You're right. We have a responsibility now. To use this money, this platform, for good." Over the next few weeks, Esperanza threw herself into action. With Mateo by her side, she began to formulate a plan that would not only address the immediate fallout from the Alvarez scandal but also tackle the systemic issues that had allowed such corruption to flourish. Her first step was to establish the Esperanza Foundation, dedicated to supporting aspiring designers from underprivileged backgrounds. She remembered all too well the struggles she had faced as a young seamstress with big dreams, and she was determined to create opportunities for others like her. But Esperanza's ambitions didn't stop there. Working closely with Ricardo, who was cooperating fully with the authorities in exchange for leniency, she began to unravel the complex web of the Alvarez family's business dealings. For every illegal operation they uncovered, they found a way to transform it into a legitimate, ethical enterprise. One particularly satisfying project was the conversion of a warehouse once used for storing smuggled goods into a community center, offering free classes in everything from sewing and design to financial literacy and entrepreneurship. As Esperanza's influence grew, so did the challenges she faced. Not everyone was happy with the changes she was implementing. One crisp autumn morning, as she arrived at the newly renovated community center for its grand opening, she found the windows smashed and threatening graffiti sprayed across the walls. "You can't save everyone, little seamstress," the red letters sneered. Esperanza felt a chill run down her spine, but she squared her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. As a crowd of concerned community members gathered, she stepped forward to address them. "Whoever did this thinks they can scare us," she declared, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "They think they can stop us from making a difference. But they're wrong. For every act of destruction, we will respond with twice as much creation. For every threat, we will answer with kindness and determination. This center will open today, as planned, and it will continue to serve this community for years to come." The crowd erupted in cheers, and as Esperanza looked out at the sea of hopeful faces, she felt a surge of resolve. This was why she was fighting. This was what made all the challenges worthwhile. As the weeks turned into months, Esperanza's life settled into a new rhythm. Her days were filled with board meetings, charity galas, and design sessions for her burgeoning fashion line. But no matter how busy she became, she never forgot her roots. She made a point of visiting her old neighborhood regularly, mentoring young designers and seamstresses, always reminding them that with talent and determination, anything was possible. Her relationship with Matteo deepened as they worked side by side. What had started as a partnership born of necessity had blossomed into something more. They complemented each other perfectly, her creativity and intuition balancing his analytical mind and journalistic instincts. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through a quiet park, Matteo suddenly stopped, turning to face Esperanza. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice serious. Esperanza felt her heart skip a beat. "What is it?" Matteo took a deep breath. "I've been offered a job. A big one. An international news agency wants me to head up their investigative unit in New York." Esperanza felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. "New York? But what about everything we're doing here? What about us?" Matteo's eyes were pained as he replied, "I don't know. It's an incredible opportunity, but the thought of leaving you. Esperanza, I think I'm falling in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and fear. Esperanza's mind raced. She had known her feelings for Matteo were growing stronger, but hearing him say those words made it all suddenly, terrifyingly real. Before she could respond, a commotion nearby caught their attention. A group of men were harassing a young woman, trying to snatch her purse. Without hesitation, Esperanza and Matteo rushed to intervene. In the scuffle that followed, Esperanza's designer dress was torn, and Matteo took a punch to the jaw. But they managed to drive off the attackers and return the purse to its grateful owner. As they sat on a park bench afterward, Esperanza dabbing at a cut on Matteo's lip with her handkerchief, they both burst into laughter at the absurdity of the situation. "Look at us," Esperanza giggled. "A famous fashion designer and a hotshot journalist, getting into street fights like a couple of vigilantes." Matteo's laughter faded into a warm smile. "We make quite a team, don't we?" Their eyes met, and in that moment, Esperanza knew. She knew that what they had was too precious to let go. "Don't take the job," she said softly. "Stay here. Stay with me. We have so much more work to do, and I think I'm falling in love with you too." Matteo's answer came in the form of a kiss, tender and passionate, full of promise and shared dreams. As they walked home that night, hand in hand, Esperanza felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would not be easy, there were still powerful people who resented her rise to prominence, still injustices to be fought and wrongs to be righted. But with Matteo by her side and the support of her newfound family and community, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did she know that the greatest test of her strength and resolve was yet to come. The following week, as Esperanza was preparing for a major fashion show that would debut her new line of ethically produced, sustainably sourced clothing, she received a cryptic message from Sofia. "We need to talk. It's about your mother. Meet me at the old cathedral at midnight. Come alone." The message sent a chill down Esperanza's spine. Her mother had passed away years ago, or at least, that's what she had always believed. But in light of all the revelations about her true parentage, Esperanza realized she couldn't be certain of anything anymore. As the clock struck midnight, Esperanza slipped into the shadowy interior of the ancient cathedral. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and the weight of centuries of prayers and secrets. "Sophia," she called softly, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. A figure emerged from behind a pillar, but it wasn't Sophia. Esperanza's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the woman standing before her. "Mama," she whispered, scarcely able to believe her eyes. Maria Mendoza looked older, more careworn than Esperanza remembered, but her eyes were the same, warm, kind, and now brimming with tears. "My darling girl," Maria said, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I'm so very sorry for all the lies." Esperanza felt as if she were in a dream. She reached out tentatively, touching her mother's face, assuring herself that this was real. "But how? Why? We thought you were dead." Maria took Esperanza's hands in hers, leading her to a nearby pew. As they sat, she began to explain. "When your father, your real father, Eduardo Alvarez, paid me to disappear, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you from a world of corruption and danger. But as the years passed, and I saw the woman you were becoming, I realized I had made a terrible mistake." Tears streamed down Maria's face as she continued. "I wanted to come back, to tell you the truth. But by then, the Alvarez family's criminal empire had grown so powerful. I knew too much, had seen too much. They made it clear that if I ever tried to contact you, they would kill us both." Esperanza listened in stunned silence, her mind struggling to process this new reality. Her mother, alive all these years, watching from afar, unable to reach out. "But now," Maria said, a hint of hope creeping into her voice, "now that the truth is out, now that the Alvarez empire has crumbled. I thought maybe, if you could find it in your heart to forgive me, we might have a chance to start over." Esperanza felt a whirlwind of emotions, joy at having her mother back, anger at the years of deception, fear of the unknown future that lay ahead. But as she looked into her mother's eyes, seeing the love and regret there, she knew what she had to do. She pulled Maria into a tight embrace, both women dissolving into tears of relief and reunion. "Of course I forgive you, Mama," Esperanza whispered. "We have so much lost time to make up for." As they held each other in the quiet of the cathedral, Esperanza felt as if another piece of the puzzle of her life had fallen into place. But even as she rejoiced in this unexpected gift, a part of her remained on guard. After all she had been through, she knew that happiness could be fleeting, and that there were always those who would seek to destroy what she had built. Her instincts proved correct. As Esperanza and Maria stepped out of the cathedral, a shot rang out in the night. Esperanza felt a searing pain in her shoulder, and the world began to spin. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was her mother's terrified face and a figure running away in the darkness. When Esperanza awoke, she found herself in a hospital bed, surrounded by worried faces: Mateo, Ricardo, Sofia, and her mother. The relief in their eyes was palpable as she stirred. "What happened?" she asked, her voice weak. Mateo squeezed her hand gently. "You were shot," he explained, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "The police are investigating, but..." "Esperanza, we think it might have been a hit ordered by some of the people your work has exposed." Esperanza closed her eyes, letting the reality of the situation wash over her. She had known there would be risks, had prepared herself for the possibility of retaliation. But facing it head-on, feeling the physical pain of the attack, made it all suddenly, terrifyingly real. As she looked around at the faces of her loved ones, each etched with concern and love, Esperanza felt a new resolve steeling itself within her. This attack, meant to silence her, to scare her into submission, had only strengthened her determination. "We can't let them win," she said, her voice growing stronger. "We've come too far, done too much good to back down now." Ricardo nodded, a fierce pride in his eyes. "You're right. And you won't be fighting alone. We're all with you, sister." Over the next few weeks, as Esperanza recovered, she and her team worked tirelessly to uncover the truth behind the attack. Their investigation led them down a twisted path of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government and business. But with each revelation, each exposed published in Mateo's hard-hitting articles, each corrupt official brought to justice, Esperanza felt the tide turning. More and more people were joining their cause, inspired by the story of the seamstress who refused to be silenced. As she stood before the mirror on the morning of her fashion show, adjusting the stunning gown she had designed to conceal her healing wound, Esperanza reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. From a humble seamstress to a powerful force for change, she had faced challenges she never could have imagined. But she had also found love, family, and purpose along the way. As she stepped out onto the runway, greeted by thunderous applause, Esperanza felt a sense of peace wash over her. Whatever the future held, whatever battles lay ahead, she was ready to face them, one stitch at a time. Little did she know that the greatest challenge of all was yet to come, a challenge that would test not only her resolve but the very foundations of the new world she had worked so hard to build. The success of Esperanza's fashion show marked a turning point in her career and in the ongoing battle against corruption in Mexico City. Her designs, which seamlessly blended high fashion with ethical production and social consciousness, had captivated the industry and the public alike. But as Esperanza was quickly learning, with great success came even greater challenges. In the months following the show, Esperanza found herself thrust into the spotlight like never before. She was hailed as a visionary, a reformer, a symbol of hope for a new Mexico. Magazine covers, television interviews, invitations to speak at international conferences, the demands on her time seemed endless. Through it all, Esperanza struggled to stay true to her roots and her mission. She made sure that for every high-profile event she attended, she also made time to visit her community center, to mentor young designers, to continue her work in exposing corruption and fighting for justice. But the pressure was taking its toll. Late one night, as Esperanza sat in her office poring over financial reports for her foundation, Mateo found her slumped over her desk, exhausted tears staining the papers beneath her. "Esperanza," he said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "You can't keep going like this. You're going to burn out." She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but still filled with determination. "I can't stop, Mateo. There's still so much to do. So many people counting on me." Mateo cupped her face gently, his eyes filled with concern and love. "I know, mi amor. But you're no good to anyone if you work yourself into the ground. You need to rest, to recharge." Esperanza nodded reluctantly, allowing Mateo to lead her home. As they lay in bed that night, Esperanza curled against Mateo's chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something big was looming on the horizon, something that would test her in ways she had never been tested before. Her instincts proved correct. The next morning, Esperanza was awakened by an urgent call from Ricardo. "Esperanza, turn on the news. Now." With a sense of foreboding, Esperanza switched on the television. Her heart sank as she saw the headlines scrolling across the screen. "Breaking: former president implicated in Alvarez scandal. Authorities claim decades of corruption at highest levels of government." As Esperanza watched in shock, the news anchor detailed the explosive revelations. Documents had surfaced linking the former president, Alejandro Morales, to the Alvarez family's criminal empire. The corruption, it seemed, went far deeper than anyone had imagined. "This is big, Esperanza," Ricardo's voice crackled through the phone. "Bigger than anything we've faced before. The whole country is going to be looking for answers, for leadership." Esperanza felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. She knew that in the coming days, all eyes would be on her, the woman who had started this avalanche of revelations. "What do we do?" she asked, her mind already racing with possibilities. Ricardo's voice was grim but determined. "We do what we've always done. We fight for the truth, no matter the cost." Over the next few weeks, Mexico was plunged into a state of political turmoil. Protests erupted in the streets, demanding justice and reform. Government officials scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal, while others dug in their heels, desperately clinging to power. In the midst of the chaos, Esperanza emerged as a voice of reason and hope. Her foundation became a rallying point for those seeking change, and her speeches inspired millions to believe in the possibility of a better, more just Mexico. But not everyone was happy with Esperanza's growing influence. One evening, as she was leaving a televised debate on government reform, a group of masked men attacked her car. If it hadn't been for the quick thinking of her security team, Esperanza might not have escaped unscathed. As she sat in the safe house Ricardo had prepared for such emergencies, surrounded by her closest allies, Mateo, Ricardo, Sofia, and her mother, Esperanza felt the full weight of the danger she was in. Maybe it's time to step back," Maria suggested hesitantly, her eyes filled with worry for her daughter. "You've done so much already, Esperanza. No one would blame you for wanting to live a quieter life." Esperanza looked around at the faces of her loved ones, each etched with concern. She thought of the comfortable life she could have running her fashion line, enjoying her newfound wealth and status, leaving the fight for others to continue. But then she thought of all the people who had put their faith in her, all the young girls in her old neighborhood who looked up to her as a symbol of what was possible. She thought of the corrupt officials who still walked free, of the injustices that still plagued her beloved Mexico. "No," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "I can't stop now. We've come too far, sacrificed too much. This is bigger than me, bigger than all of us. We have a chance to really change things, to build a better future for Mexico. I have to see this through." Mateo squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with pride and love. "Then we'll face it together. All of us." As the others nodded in agreement, Esperanza felt a surge of gratitude for the family she had found, not the family she was born into, but the one she had chosen and that had chosen her in return. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Esperanza threw herself into the fight for reform with renewed vigor. She used her fashion shows as platforms for political statements, her designs incorporating symbols of resistance and hope. She worked closely with honest politicians and activists to draft new anti-corruption legislation. But her most audacious move came when she announced her intention to run for public office. The announcement sent shockwaves through the political establishment. Many dismissed her as a naive outsider, a fashion designer playing at politics. Others saw her as a genuine threat to the status quo. As Esperanza hit the campaign trail, she faced challenges she had never encountered before. Her past was scrutinized, her every word analyzed and often twisted by her opponents. She faced skepticism, ridicule, and outright hostility from those who saw her as a threat to their power. But for every setback, there were moments of triumph. Esperanza's authenticity and passion resonated with the people. Her rallies drew crowds in the thousands, filled with citizens hungry for real change. One particularly memorable moment came during a televised debate with her main opponent, a seasoned politician named Carlos Vega. As Vega attempted to dismiss Esperanza's lack of political experience, she fired back with a response that would be replayed countless times in the coming weeks. "You're right, Señor Vega. I don't have years of political experience. I haven't spent decades in the halls of power, making backroom deals and lining my pockets. What I have is something far more valuable, the experience of an ordinary Mexican citizen. I know what it's like to struggle, to dream, to fight against a system that seems designed to keep people like me down. And that's exactly why I'm standing here today. Because it's time for a government that truly represents the people, not just the powerful elite." The audience erupted in cheers, and even Vega looked momentarily stunned by the power of her words. As election day approached, the race grew increasingly tight. Esperanza's grassroots campaign had gained tremendous momentum, but the entrenched political machines were fighting back hard. The night before the election, Esperanza found herself unable to sleep. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Mateo, and made her way to the balcony of their apartment. As she looked out over the twinkling lights of Mexico City, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. From a humble seamstress to a fashion icon, from an outsider to a political candidate, it seemed almost unbelievable. Yet here she was, on the cusp of potentially becoming one of the most influential figures in Mexican politics. As she stood there, lost in thought, she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she saw her mother, Maria, watching her with a mixture of pride and concern. "Couldn't sleep?" Maria asked softly, joining her daughter at the railing. Esperanza shook her head. "I keep thinking about tomorrow, about what it could mean for all of us." Maria wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Whatever happens, mihija, know that you have already changed so much. You've given people hope, shown them what's possible when someone stands up for what's right." Esperanza leaned into her mother's embrace, drawing strength from her presence. "I'm scared, Mama," she admitted quietly. "What if I win? What if I lose? Either way, nothing will ever be the same." Maria turned Esperanza to face her, her hands gentle but firm on her daughter's shoulders. "Listen to me, Esperanza. You are stronger than you know. You have overcome so much, faced down threats and challenges that would have broken most people. Whatever tomorrow brings, you will face it with the same courage and grace you've shown every step of this journey." As mother and daughter stood there, the first light of dawn began to paint the sky. Election day had arrived. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Esperanza cast her vote early, surrounded by a sea of cameras and supporters. Then came the agonizing wait as the results began to trickle in. Esperanza and her team gathered in a hotel suite, watching the numbers fluctuate on a giant screen. The race was incredibly close, with the lead changing hands several times throughout the night. As midnight approached, the tension in the room was palpable. Mateo paced nervously, while Ricardo stared intently at his laptop, analyzing the incoming data. Sofia and Maria sat quietly in a corner, hands clasped in silent prayer. Suddenly, Ricardo let out a whoop of excitement. "Esperanza! The final numbers are in from Mexico City. You've taken the lead." The room erupted in cheers, but Esperanza held up a hand, her eyes fixed on the television. The national news was about to make a projection. "Ladies and gentlemen," the anchor announced, his voice trembling slightly with the weight of the moment. "Based on the results we've seen, we are now prepared to call this election. The next representative for Mexico City's 3rd District will be Esperanza Mendoza." For a moment, Esperanza couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It didn't seem real. Then Mateo was lifting her up, spinning her around, his laughter mingling with her tears of joy and disbelief. As the reality of her victory sank in, Esperanza was overwhelmed by a mixture of elation and trepidation. She had done it, she had won. But she knew that the real work was only just beginning. In the days that followed, as Esperanza prepared to take office, she was keenly aware of the enormous responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. She had promised the people change, had vowed to fight corruption and injustice at the highest levels. Now she would have to deliver. Her first act as a newly elected official was to propose a comprehensive anti-corruption bill, one that would create an independent oversight committee and implement strict transparency measures for all government dealings. The bill faced fierce opposition from entrenched interests, and Esperanza soon found herself embroiled in the complex, often frustrating world of legislative politics. There were long nights of negotiations, heated debates on the chamber floor, and moments when it seemed like the forces of the status quo would prevail. But Esperanza refused to give up. She rallied public support, worked tirelessly to build coalitions, and never lost sight of the promises she had made to the people who had put their faith in her. After months of struggle, the bill finally came to a vote. As Esperanza stood in the chamber, watching the electronic tally board light up, she held her breath. The numbers ticked up. 50%, 60%, and finally, 70% in favor. The bill had passed. As cheers erupted around her, Esperanza felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was why she had entered politics, why she had risked everything. This was the change she had dreamed of bringing to her beloved Mexico. But even as she celebrated this victory, Esperanza knew that her journey was far from over. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to overcome. The forces of corruption and injustice would not give up easily. Yet as she looked out at the sea of faces, her colleagues, her supporters, the ordinary citizens who had placed their trust in her, Esperanza felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. She thought back to the young girl she had once been, stitching dreams into fabric in a tiny apartment. That girl could never have imagined the path her life would take, the heights she would reach, the changes she would help bring about. But one thing remained constant: her belief in the power of hard work, determination, and the unbreakable spirit of those who dare to dream of a better world. As Esperanza stepped up to the podium to address the nation, she knew that this was not an ending, but a new beginning. The next chapter of her incredible journey was just starting to unfold, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, with courage, with compassion, and with the unwavering support of the family and community she had found along the way. The seamstress who had once been invisible had become a beacon of hope for millions. And as she began to speak, her voice ringing out clear and strong, Esperanza knew that the greatest triumphs and the greatest tests were yet to come. 5 years had passed since Esperanza Mendoza's historic election victory, and Mexico was a country transformed. The anti-corruption measures she had championed had taken root, slowly but surely changing the political landscape. Transparency in government had increased, corrupt officials had been ousted, and a new sense of hope permeated the nation. But the path had not been easy. For every victory Esperanza achieved, there were setbacks and challenges. The old guard fought tooth and nail against her reforms, using every trick in the book to undermine her efforts. There were smear campaigns, threats, and even attempts to manipulate the legal system to discredit her. Through it all, Esperanza remained steadfast. Her unwavering integrity and genuine commitment to the people had earned her a loyal following. She had become more than just a politician; she was a symbol of what Mexico could be. As Esperanza prepared for her re-election campaign, she couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. From a humble seamstress to one of the most influential figures in Mexican politics, her life had taken turns she never could have imagined. But even as she stood at the height of her political power, Esperanza felt a familiar restlessness stirring within her. The world of politics, with its compromises and constant battles, had begun to wear on her soul. She longed for the simple joy of creation, the feel of fabric beneath her fingers, the satisfaction of bringing beauty into the world. It was a crisp autumn morning when Esperanza made a decision that would once again change the course of her life. She called a press conference, and as cameras flashed and reporters leaned in eagerly, she made her announcement. "My fellow citizens," she began, her voice clear and strong. "5 years ago, you placed your trust in me to help lead our nation towards a brighter future. Together, we have made great strides in the fight against corruption and injustice. But there is still much work to be done." She paused, taking in the sea of expectant faces before her. "It is with both sadness and hope that I announce today that I will not be seeking re-election." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a flurry of questions. Esperanza held up a hand, silencing the commotion. "My decision is not made lightly, nor is it made out of fear or fatigue. Rather, it comes from a deep conviction that true change cannot rely on a single individual. The work we have begun must be carried forward by all of us, by the people of Mexico who yearn for a just and prosperous nation." She smiled, a hint of the young seamstress she had once been shining through. "I entered politics to make a difference, to give voice to those who had been silenced for too long. But I have come to realize that my voice can be just as powerful, perhaps even more so, outside the constraints of political office." Esperanza went on to outline her plans. She would be launching a new initiative, a combination of her two great passions, fashion and social justice. The Esperanza Institute would be a school and incubator for aspiring designers from underprivileged backgrounds, teaching not just the art of fashion but also ethical business practices and social responsibility. Through this institute, she explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm, we will nurture the next generation of creative minds and social entrepreneurs. We will show the world that fashion can be a force for good, that beauty and ethics can go hand in hand. As Esperanza stepped down from the podium, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She knew there would be those who would criticize her decision, who would accuse her of abandoning the political fight. But in her heart, she knew this was the right path. In the weeks that followed, as Esperanza threw herself into the preparations for the Institute, she found herself reinvigorated. The joy of creation, of building something new and meaningful, filled her with a sense of purpose she had almost forgotten. Mateo, ever her steadfast partner, supported her decision wholeheartedly. "You're at your best when you're creating, mi amor," he told her one evening as they pored over plans for the Institute. "This is where you'll truly shine." The opening of the Esperanza Institute was a star-studded affair, attracting attention from around the world. Fashion icons, political leaders, and social activists gathered to celebrate the launch of this groundbreaking initiative. As Esperanza stood before the ribbon, scissors in hand, she felt a surge of emotion. This was more than just a school, it was a testament to everything she had fought for, an embodiment of her belief that one person's dream could spark a movement. With this institute, she declared, her voice ringing out clear and strong, we are not just teaching fashion. We are nurturing dreams, empowering voices, and weaving a new future for Mexico and the world. The scissors sliced through the ribbon, and applause erupted. As Esperanza turned to face the crowd, she caught sight of familiar faces in the front row, her mother, tears of pride shining in her eyes, Ricardo, grinning broadly, Sofia, nodding in approval. And beside them, to Esperanza's surprise, stood Dona Victoria. The years had not been kind to Victoria. The fall of the Alvarez Empire had left her a shadow of her former self. But as her eyes met Esperanza's, there was a flicker of something, respect, perhaps, or a grudging admiration. Later, at the reception, Victoria approached Esperanza. The two women stood face to face, years of history hanging between them. "You've done well for yourself," Victoria said finally, her voice lacking its former imperial tone. "I underestimated you, all those years ago." Esperanza regarded her carefully. "We've all made mistakes, Dona Victoria. The question is, what do we do to make amends?" Victoria's lips quirked in a small, rueful smile. Perhaps you could use an experienced hand at your institute? Someone to teach the finer points of haute couture?" Esperanza felt a moment of hesitation. Could she really work alongside the woman who had once been her greatest nemesis? But as she looked into Victoria's eyes, she saw not the proud, cruel socialite of years past, but a woman humbled by fate, seeking redemption. "I think we might be able to arrange something," Esperanza said finally, extending her hand. Victoria took it, and in that handshake lay the possibility of healing old wounds, of moving beyond the bitter past towards a more hopeful future. As the years passed, the Esperanza Institute flourished. Young designers from across Mexico and beyond flocked to study there, drawn by the promise of an education that balanced creativity with conscience. Esperanza's designs, now produced exclusively by graduates of the Institute, became coveted not just for their beauty but for the ethical practices behind their creation. But Esperanza's influence extended far beyond the world of fashion. She became a respected voice on issues of social justice and ethical business practices, speaking at conferences around the world and advising governments on sustainable development policies. Through it all, she never forgot her roots. Every year, she would return to her old neighborhood, hosting workshops for aspiring designers and offering scholarships to promising young talents. On one such visit, as Esperanza walked the familiar streets of her childhood, she found herself outside the tiny apartment where she had once stitched dreams into fabric. On a whim, she knocked on the door. A young girl answered, her eyes widening in recognition. You're Esperanza Mendoza," she gasped. Esperanza smiled warmly. "I am. And who might you be?" "I'm Lucia," the girl replied shyly. I want to be a designer like you someday." Esperanza's heart swelled with emotion. She saw in Lucia's eyes the same fire, the same determination she had once felt. "May I come in?" she asked gently. Inside, Esperanza found a scene achingly familiar, scraps of fabric scattered about, crude sketches pinned to the walls, a battered sewing machine in the corner. Lucia showed her designs with a mixture of pride and nervousness. As Esperanza looked through the girl's work, offering encouragement and advice, she felt a sense of completion. The circle had come full round. She had become the mentor she had once so desperately needed. Before she left, Esperanza pressed a business card into Lucia's hand. "When you're ready," she said, "come to the Institute. We'll be waiting for you." The look of joy and hope on Lucia's face stayed with Esperanza long after she had left the apartment. It reminded her of why she had started this journey, why every struggle and sacrifice had been worth it. As Esperanza made her way home that evening, the streets of Mexico City alive with the energy of a nation in transformation, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had faced countless challenges, had risen from humble beginnings to the heights of power, had known love and loss, triumph and betrayal. Through it all, she had remained true to herself and to the values she held dear. She had not just achieved her own dreams, but had created a legacy that would continue to change lives for generations to come. That night, as Esperanza stood on the balcony of her home, Mateo's arms wrapped around her, she looked out over the city she loved. The lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a life, a dream, a possibility. "Are you happy, mi amor?" Mateo asked softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. Esperanza smiled, leaning back into his embrace. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied. "We've come so far, haven't we?" Mateo chuckled. "From clandestine meetings and dangerous investigations to this? I'd say we've done all right for ourselves." As they stood there, content in each other's company, Esperanza's mind drifted to the future. There would always be new challenges to face, new battles to fight. The work of creating a just and equitable world was never truly finished. But she was ready for whatever lay ahead. With Mateo by her side, with the support of her family, both blood and chosen, and with the fire of determination that had carried her this far, Esperanza knew she could face anything. From a humble seamstress to a beacon of hope for an entire nation, Esperanza Mendoza had woven a tapestry of change. Her story had become intertwined with the story of Mexico itself, a tale of perseverance, of the power of dreams, and of the indomitable spirit of those who dared to reach for the stars. As the night deepened and the city slowly quieted, Esperanza felt a familiar stirring in her soul, the call of new ideas, new creations waiting to be born. Tomorrow would bring new designs to sketch, new students to mentor, new challenges to face. But for now, in this moment of quiet reflection, Esperanza savored the journey that had brought her here. She had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of countless others. She had shown that with courage, integrity, and unwavering determination, even the humblest among us can rise to change the world. The seamstress had triumphed, not just over adversity, but over the very notion of limitations. Her legacy would live on in every life she had touched, in every dream she had inspired, in every stitch of positive change woven into the fabric of society. As Esperanza finally turned to go inside, hand in hand with Mateo, she paused for one last look at the city below. A soft smile played on her lips as she whispered words that had become her life's mantra. Dream big, work hard, and never forget where you came from. For in the end, it's not about the height you reach, but the lives you lift up along the way. With that, Esperanza Mendoza, the seamstress who had changed a nation, stepped into her home, ready to face whatever new adventures tomorrow might bring. Her story, like the finest garment, was a masterpiece of resilience, love, and the enduring power of the human spirit.